Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Grossman, and I work for the Washington.
We are live.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Grossman, and I work for the Washington State Department of Commerce. Emily Grossman. And I'm here to moderate this session this morning on maintaining community health in intergenerational households, Seattle Chinatown International District PDA's North Lot. And I'd like to introduce our speakers, Maggie Green, Associate with Weber Thompson, and Maiko Winkler-Chin, who's the Executive Director of Seattle Chinatown International District Preservation and Development Authority. They'll give a presentation and then they'd like to have a discussion. So we'll have Q&A. If you have questions, enter them in the chat and I will turn the session over to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Before Maggie and I start, we just wanted to thank Housing Washington for allowing us to discuss our project today and for holding the housing conference and for the sponsors in support of this work. So thank you very much. As Emily mentioned, we're here to talk about the project that we are both, Maggie and I are working on together. It's the North Lot of the Pacific Hospital PDA campus that we are purchasing. And Maggie, let's start the slide deck if we could, please.
Sure.
Maggie's the tech person. Maggie's multifunctioning as tech and presenter.
Got it. There we go.
There we go. All right, Maggie, you want to go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So basically, this presentation is basically about letting community needs drive the development decisions. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit about the Seattle Chinatown International District Preservation and Development Authority. You can call us SCIDpda, the SCIDpda, the PDA, whatever floats your boat. We are a city chartered entity formed by the community in 1975. So we're in midlife. We're about 46 years old. And our mission is to preserve, promote, and develop the Chinatown International District as a vibrant community and unique ethnic neighborhood. And we do this by providing affordable housing for low-income residents, commercial space for small businesses and nonprofits, community economic development and engagement work, and real estate development to increase the availability of housing and equitable space in our neighborhood. Next slide, please. One of the things that we do is property management. And we hear a lot from the property management team. And from our property management team, we glean all kinds of information. So specifically to our residents, we hear from them that people wanted and needed larger units, that we had families that were spread across smaller units in studios and ones throughout the neighborhood that we managed. So that was interesting to us, where mom and dad may live in one unit and grandparents may live in another, but they really wanted to live together as one or have the opportunity to do that if that's what they wanted. And we also knew that our most successful building that we had in our housing stock was Domingo Verena's apartments, which are, it's a 57-unit building with 2 and 3 bedrooms. And that the State Department of Commerce once told us that we had the lowest vacancy time in that. That building rarely sits vacant because it is hard to find 2 and 3 bedroom affordable housing units in our community. We would also note that our residents, I guess, stay longer with us than they do with definitely market rate, where the average tenancy is about 27 months. But I also looked this up last year. I think the average length of tenancy is about 6 to 7 years in standard affordable housing. 73% of our residents in 2 and 3 bedrooms live more than 6 years. And in Domingo Verena's apartments, the one with all the 2 and 3 bedroom units, we have people that have lived in that building since it opened in 2004. 22% of our residents have lived there since then. So for us, it's a very, very stable building. And the families there like living there. And I think part of it is they like living there, but I think it's hard for them to find other places to live. and it's in a community that's supportive of them. So it's close to other amenities like the community center, the library, the public health clinic across the street. So it is well situated and it fits well into our neighborhood. Next slide, please. What's also interesting, I think, about our community and maybe about yours too, is that intergenerational or multi-generational living is quite common. It's how I grew up. It is how a bunch of our staff grew up. And I know by looking at statistics that came out during coronavirus and the pandemic that we're still in, Asian American families, Latinx families, people of color families tend to live more in multi-generational households. So 19% of our residents in multi-bedroom units are 61 years and older, and 34% of residents in multi-bedroom units are 17 years or younger. And it should note that within our neighborhood, the Chinatown ID, we do happen to have a higher rate of seniors than anywhere else in the neighborhood. So even in our standard tax credit units that are not senior designated, we have a high percentage of seniors living there. And the internal joke in our neighborhood is if you're 65, you're really not a senior. If you're 62, that's really not a senior, because our seniors, we've had independent residents live well into their 90s in our units. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the location. Here, Maggie has pulled up a great map. The site of this project, the North Lot, is just south of downtown. So if you look at downtown, this is a map of downtown Seattle. The Chinatown International District is just on the southern edge of that. And then just south of the intersection between I-90 and I-5 is North Beacon Hill. And that little orange spot is the site that we are building on here. And it is at the base of the Pacific Tower. The Pacific Tower is pretty iconic in the in the Seattle skyline. If you drive through on I-5, you'll probably see it. It's that thing that looks like it's out of a Batman movie, kind of a little goth, a little bit like Gotham City, but not as gloomy. And it is really, really close, as you can see, to downtown. It's very close to transit. For all those reasons, it's a great site. And don't worry, our building will not block the views of the Pacific Tower. Can't, because it's a historic building on a historic landmark site. So there's elements of the project that Maggie and her team have had to adjust around to meet historic code. Next slide, please. So a couple of things to note about the site. We in the state, I would say, are living through an affordable housing crisis. So we have a couple maps here to illustrate some of the concerns that we are working on trying to prevent happening. So if you look here, you'll see a circle with a little black triangle on it, and that is the site. And so in the area that we work in, we have high rates of households being cost burdened, which means they pay more than 30% of their income towards the cost of housing. They pay more than that, and that then means that you are cost burdened in housing. And if you look, the darker blue you are on the cost burden, the worse you are off. You're paying more than what you should be for housing. So we live in a neighborhood, or the housing will be built in the neighborhood that is a cost burden. And I say we because I do live in that neighborhood as well. So that's the kind of area. We want to make sure that people are stable, and having a higher cost burden typically means that your housing becomes unstable that way. The other one is displacement risk. If you look, the more you go from yellow to red, you have a higher displacement risk, meaning that that's another risk of losing your housing, right? So housing instability. Earlier this year, there was an article in the Seattle Times that mentioned that North Beacon Hill is probably the most gentrified neighborhood in Seattle, because between 2010 and 2019, housing prices nearly doubled from $300,000 for a single family home up to $589,000 for a single family home. And I'll tell you, the homes in my neighborhood have gone up higher than that. So housing prices have escalated a lot in Seattle. What's not mentioned in these slides is that the city of Seattle, during their comprehensive plan process, went through and did an equity analysis of different neighborhoods in Seattle. And it was opportunity versus displacement risk. And the Chinatown ID, which is just south of downtown, was noted as very high opportunity because you're close into jobs, you're really close into a major transit hub, and you're close to opportunity because that transit will get you to the University of Washington, very close to Seattle colleges, training programs, all these opportunity. You've got great educational resources there for you. But because of the change in housing prices, you're very close to being, you have a very high displacement risk as well. And so if Chinatown is at high, just across that little quarter-mile bridge, less than a quarter-mile bridge to North Beacon Hill is also rated as a high opportunity, high displacement risk area. So those are some of the challenges that we are trying to work on through this. Next slide, please, Maggie. The other thing that we would also note that became apparent over time, not the first thing that comes to mind, is that we are dealing with climate crisis issues there, just some real health risks there. So I had mentioned that the site is just above I-90 and the I-5 interchange, and we're right above SoDo, which is a large industrial area. We are also, the other way you might have seen it is if you've ever flown into SeaTac, you will see the Pacific Tower because a lot of airplanes that are coming into SeaTac fly right over the site, which causes noise pollution as well. So if you look at this, the higher towards the red you go, the worse you are in terms of environmental exposures. And this is not a proud thing for us. We are in the top 10% for having the worst air quality there in the state. So it's not great. And it's not great because if you look at both the short-term effects and the long-term effects of air pollution, they're awful things to contend with. And knowing that our households tend to live in our housing for a long time, that children are, move into these units and they stay with us till they move out to go to college or after that, that is a long time to be exposed to these conditions. And that is not something that is what anybody really wants to live with, thinking about that. So how do you address that? Next slide, please. So how do we measure success in affordable housing? I think as somebody who's developed it, we all know that these metrics and these measures that we're all trying to go forward, that partly because we need the funding to build it, right? So our typical success metrics as we look at a site is, geez, how many units can I get on that site? And the logic is that more homes mean more people housed. And the consequences is that, oftentimes when you're trying to make those decisions, you might want to go more towards 1-bedrooms or studios, because then you get your unit count up and it may look more attractive, and you may sacrifice other things like commercial spaces or the number of 3-bedroom units that you want in order to try to get your unit count up so you look more attractive, right, to the investment world. The other one is really the cost per unit. And I totally understand that. In that, one, you're trying to spend less on any unit results in more money to provide to more units. There's cost caps that you're trying to fit into. And it is hard when you're building a 3-bedroom unit because a lot of contractors are like, I don't know how to price that, because they haven't had to price that a lot. And so your costs are, in the best word, I guess, squishy. I guess the other thing is that we're always trying to do things in order to get points for our tax credit applications if you're trying to do that. So you're always trying to fit somebody else's, you're just trying to get points, right? Because you need to get the project built. But what are you sacrificing in that process? Are you really thinking about what you should be? Next slide, please, Maggie. And what we tried to do is try a different approach. So what was really important to us and my organization and my board of directors is that we work on increasing family size housing stock. And what we call family size housing is 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. I know that that's a different distinction than some of the other funders, but for us, when I say family housing, it is 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. we wanted to increase it because we saw a need. And that's what the data that we looked at showed us. We wanted to provide a healthy environment because, as I said, it's a moral imperative if you're raising children in that environment that you're not damaging them for the future, and that we do tend to have high rates of asthma in the Chinatown International District, and that would also equal North Beacon Hill. And it is it's imperative for us that we can live healthy, vibrant lives, that the community can. The third is we had to collaborate with partners who support the same mission and idea and approach. And next slide, please. And so our first partner in this was really the Pacific Hospital Preservation and Development Authority, the PHPDA, our sister PDA right across the little bridge that separates North Beacon Hill from the Chinatown ID. They were important in several ways. One, the land in the neighborhood that I work in is extremely, extremely expensive and quite valuable because the fact that you are so close to opportunity. And that makes it really, really hard to work in. Our parcels are selling for multiple millions of dollars. And we just don't have the cash and the ability to move quickly as a for-profit developer. We just can't. That's not the way that we operate. So that makes it a challenge. So having the PHPDA think about their mission, which is stated here, and think about who they want to serve, and them having this asset, which is this parking lot in front of their building, and what could they do to further live their mission and to meet their goals, was great. And so for them to work with us in figuring this out and to build something jointly that meets their interests and our interests together was the perfect opportunity for us. And we really thank John Kim and the board of the PHPDA for this. And the previous executive director of the PHPDA, because this didn't start when John started, it started in the previous administration. That's the other thing. Some of these things take a long time, but I think if you're a developer, you kind of know that. The next slide, please. In having this opportunity to work with the PHPDA, they had some conditions. And one of them was that they wanted a place for children on site. So it was one of those, SCIDpda, if you're doing this, one, you have to work, you have to place a child care facility on the site. And for us, that was just great. This is the third development that we have that has a child care provider on site. And they wanted to work with El Centro de la Raza, whose main offices and main child care facility is a mile away from the site. And they have another child care facility a mile away from the site. And I have friends who have been trying to get their kids into those child care facilities, and their kids will probably age out or be close to aging out by the time they get in because the wait lists are really, really long. They're a culturally competent child care center and are really focused on community, and child care is just one of the things that they do. So of course they were a great partner for us, and we're really, we were happy and pleased to work with them on this. The other one is an organization that we're much more familiar with. It's AI PACE, called Aging in PACE Washington. PACE is a program of all-inclusive care for the elderly, and it's something that we had been working with this group in for quite some time. We, in our community, and probably in yours, realize that seniors do well when they are connected with each other, with their families and the communities that they live in. But sometimes they need to go and spend a little bit more time intentionally in having all their needs met. And a PACE program is one where a senior goes there, they get to socialize with friends, they have their needs met, they have a meal, there's a whole medical team working with them at that one place where they go. And then at the end of the day, they go home and spend time with their family in the communities, right? And so they don't lose those connections and they build new connections. And that is, it's a national model that was started in San Francisco's Chinatown with the Unlock PACE program. And so that was really, really important to our community to have those types of systems that were there. And that was the other condition of building on the site. And we're like, that's great, because we do have a lot of seniors living in and around North Beacon Hill. And that's really who we want them to stay because they're good for our families and they're good for us as individuals to have the seniors around. And so we really wanted that center. So we were very happy that we could house them in this development. And I think there's one thing, oh, I think Maggie's going to touch on this. This is the first phase of this development. Maggie, I think next slide, please.
All right, so thanks, Maiko. In talking with SCIDpda, the folks at Weber Thompson, that's where I work as an architect. In talking with SCIDpda, we really started to understand that importance of multi-generational living and family to this community. And, you know, Maiko touched on this a little bit, but families and their needs really tend to evolve over time, especially when the family lives in a building for as many years as many of their families do. So really embracing that evolution over the many stages of life and creating space for everyone, all within a healthy environment, really became the mission while designing this project. You saw an aerial view of the city denoting the site in an earlier slide, but what's hard to understand from that image is the unique character of this site. The development site is the northern parcel of the Pacific Hospital Historic Campus, which includes a hospital tower from the 1920s and several smaller but equally ornate office buildings centered around a communal lawn. The whole campus is encircled with a landmarked wrought iron fence and tree buffer. Even the trees are landmarked. It's kind of interesting. This historic brick compound, it sits at the very far north end of Beacon Hill in Seattle. And while it's really well connected via short and convenient transit or a quick walk across the Jose Rizal Bridge that Maiko mentioned, its immediate context is really just a sloping park that leads straight down to a colossal interstate intersection between I-5 and I-90. And that really is where the pollution, for the most part, is coming from in terms of air quality. You've just got this huge intersection with so many vehicles day in and day out. And there's also noise pollution from that as well, as Maiko mentioned, and the airplane traffic flying overhead. The site has really amazing sweeping views of the city. It has views like none other. It's pretty impressive. And the really only direct neighbor is the historic hospital tower itself, which is directly south. Separating the tower from this development site is an internal driveway. You can see that indicated in orange there. Because of the encompassing landmark fence and trees, access is somewhat limited to the site itself. And yet we have these two bustling commercial spaces with AI Pace and El Centro, both with drop-off and pickup needs. So with that in mind, we've redeveloped the internal drive between the tower and the site to act as a front door and public street for the new development. The image you see on the left is a ground floor plan. This project is broken into two phases, which Maiko mentioned. The first phase is the southern building, which is also known as Building A. And the second phase will be that more northern building you see in blue there. Building A contains the two commercial spaces for AI Pace and El Centro, and you can see those indicated in the shades of orange on the screen. There's a break at the ground floor of that first building, of Building A, to allow for like a pedestrian portal through the building itself. And that leads back into more of the residential center of the project, because at the heart, this is a residential project. And you can see the lobbies for both residential buildings in yellow there and how they feed off that main portal. And it really helps to activate that main drive. So anyone coming to visit the site, whether you're visiting a residence there or arriving via public transit and you are a resident, or if you're coming to AI Pace or coming to El Centro, everybody's coming and going via this main street. The images on the right show the streetscape of the internal drive, which will include lay-by parking for drop-off and pickup. And AI Pace's frontage is in that top image, and you can see that there's a really big, large freestanding canopy, and that's to shelter seniors as they disembark vehicles. When we talk about family housing, it's important to recognize that not all families come in the same shape and size. Some have many children, some have none. Some households include grandparents, some have only one parent. And that unique mix of sizes of units in this development was created to respond to the multitudes of families. Over half the units include 2 or more bedrooms, 20% of which actually have 3 or more bedrooms. This sort of flexibility really caters to multi-generational living, and the ways that families evolve over time. So how did we fit in all these large units into our project? Frequently, including larger units into a project isn't actually limited by area or space, but rather by frontage. Real bedrooms require windows, which means each bedroom needs presence along the facade. We typically aim for 10-foot wide bedrooms and 12-foot wide living rooms. And when you add those dimensions together, along with wall thickness, it means a typical 2-bedroom unit requires at least 33 feet of frontage. And you can see that illustrated in that unit plan in the middle of the slide there. In order to fit more multi-bedroom units into a project, we needed a way to fit a unit into less frontage. Our solution was to stagger the bedrooms such that one is slid behind the other, which you can see in that upper left unit plan. When that's paired with a mirrored unit adjacent to it, those rear bedrooms still receive lots of light and openness at their windows. And this strategy is what creates those little modulating recesses along the facade that you can see in the overall plan at the bottom of the screen. This strategy results in at least one more full 2-bedroom unit and an additional bedroom on each side of the corridor. So overall, when you add that up, that's 30 additional bedrooms for the project just because of the way we're staggering that unit plan. There's more to family life than number of bedrooms, though, of course. Families need different types of spaces than just a building full of single people, and spaces that really cater to a wide variety of age groups. Every residential floor has a hub of amenity rooms that add auxiliary spaces for family life. There's a lounge room with a TV and comfortable seating, and also a room we call the library. The library includes study desks, a small group table, and comfortable chairs for reading. And these occur on every floor, along with the laundry room and sort of a seating area just outside the elevators. And these spaces provide opportunities to socialize with neighbors or even just create a little distance from your family. And I'm sure throughout the pandemic, we've all had moments where a little distance from your own family is something you can appreciate. For teens especially, finding quiet opportunities to study can be really challenging in a full apartment. The library creates a place that they can focus and actually, have quiet space to do homework while still being just safely down the hall from home, so without really leaving home. And for seniors, that quiet place is a place to read, or the lounge room is a place to chat with a friend, again, without being in your kitchen and living room that everyone is potentially in. Diversity of spaces really extends to outside as well. The courtyard that naturally forms between the two residential buildings becomes a gathering place with a large patios and tables and chairs. And this large courtyard is being developed as part of the first phase of the project. So this will be there in place before the second building even comes in. The patios look out onto the lawn for, play space or just sun lounging. And there are planters beyond that. At the very far north end of the site, at the lowest but sunniest location, is a pea patch type garden area as well for residents. El Centro's daycare program requires play spaces for children, and a large play space and structure are also located in the courtyard. And they're open to residents when not in use by the daycare. So we've really got a great overlap of uses there that are helping build the community of the residents as well as helping fit the needs of the commercial entities on site. And it creates a good, fun place for children to burn some energy. SCIDpda had identified providing a healthy environment for residents and counteracting the existing air pollution as a really important aspect for developing family housing. Because of this goal, SCIDpda decided the project would participate in the Housing Development Consortium's Exemplary Building Program. And HDC created the program as a response to the impacts development and really more importantly, building operations have on our environment, which are highlighted in yellow on that pie chart on the screen. To combat these, the program requires the project to undergo strict energy modeling and choose a target from those listed in that blue box. We chose targeting an EUI of less than 20. And if you're not familiar with EUI, what we're really saying here is we targeted a really low energy usage for the building operations. But that's not really because we necessarily cared about reducing the energy uses, as awful as that sounds. The real reason we wanted to go through this program was more because the systems that are required to achieve that low energy usage provide more direct benefits to future residents. This low energy usage target informed decisions through the design project, or the design of the project. Everything from appliances to wall construction, lighting, heating, and ventilation. And the result is a building that should achieve a 17.7 EUI and an energy saving approaching 50%. In other words, this building will use roughly half of the energy of a typical similar building, which is pretty awesome. And while it's great that the building will require less energy to operate, again, this wasn't actually our reason for going through the program. More important to this team was that the higher quality, energy efficient systems will also have a direct improvement on residents. Each apartment has its own ERV, or energy recovery ventilator, and ERVs serve to precondition air coming into the apartment, and they also filter it. ERVs provide benefits of clean, fresh air that no longer include the pollution from outside. So when you couple that with more efficient windows and well-insulated exterior walls, which were also required to achieve that low energy usage, the building also reduces noise pollution for residents. And what you end up with is a really clean air situation and a very calm environment compared to what it could have been. The decisions that SCIDpda made for the benefit of residents have a positive impact beyond just this building and community, though. By creating a more efficient, environmentally friendly building, we'll be reducing pollution by reducing energy consumption for decades to come. Improvements to the indoor air quality for residents will reduce health-related issues health-related issues that would have come from the pollution, and create some points of relief in our healthcare system, which is also a great benefit. And I think it goes without saying that providing individuals or families with stable housing has a really dramatic impact on their quality of life, and that improvement allows greater success for both the individuals and the communities they live in throughout their lives. So we're going to open up to questions here, and you can put questions into the chat box, and we'll have a bit of a dialogue. And while you think of questions to add to the chat box, Maiko, do you have any overall takeaways from this development or overarching thoughts you'd like to share? Oh, you're muted.
So what comes to mind for me, if I'm looking at this from a very 50,000 foot level, other than Maggie's challenges of trying to interpret what I'm saying into actual, she has to be the translator between what Maiko says and what that means on the built environment side, right? Which is always a challenge if you know me. So if I'm thinking about it from 50,000 foot level, it's that our ultimate outcome is really to have a healthy, vibrant place where people can choose to live until they're ready to move on to whatever else the next thing is for them. And knowing from our own personal life experiences, if we think back to our own lives, we know how our living situations or our lives change over time. If I were to look at a 15-year period in my life, I was single, got a boyfriend, got married, my mother moved in, I had a child, my mother passed away, and all those things. And in that time, I had 2 jobs, my husband had 4 or 5, kid changed school 3 times. We needed childcare, we needed adult care for a while, we needed schools, we needed parks, all of that. So that access to opportunity and the location of the housing is really, really key. And we all need that. I also think we also know that community is very important for our own mental health, and how important those community connections can be. And as a child of non-English speaking parents, community was survival for us. There's no way we would have made it through life without the community supports that we had, either before finding a job or explaining things or helping understand what a medical condition is, just how important that is. And we can reflect on that as we're going through this pandemic, that we really relied upon each other. I don't know if there's a metric that captures all of that and whether we have the patience to see how all these measures feed into our long-term development policies. But I think that's what I think about personally as we build in this neighborhood, and what is the small role that we play in helping place housing in our neighborhoods in order to reach a much bigger outcome than just a unit. So that's where I'm leaving that.
I think for me, it's very similar. It was really inspiring to watch SCIDpda challenge the typical assumptions about affordable housing with funders, all because they really knew the people they were building for. And I think we tend to gravitate toward data-driven metrics because they're so easy to quantify, and that feels really nice. But I don't know that they always lead to the right decisions. They lead to decisions that when you write it out on paper, you go, great, looks great, but they don't necessarily capture the whole picture. I think data tends to remove the human factor, if you will. And I think arguably that's maybe the most important factor when you're considering housing. It's hard to measure metrics for long-term healthcare benefits of cleaner air, and it's hard to measure metrics around children and grandparents living in the same home or staying in the same school district over a length of time or being close to a community, you know. But I think these secondary and tertiary effects really have true value for our communities in the long run. And I think we should rethink the way we incentivize and measure success for affordable housing. So let's take some questions. I'm going to unshare my screen so that it's just our faces. And Emily, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, we have some questions. Let's see, I'm just going to take them as they came. There are a few. What is the timeline for the project?
We should be, and Emily, you should know this. We are hoping to close on financing first quarter of next year for phase 1. And it'll probably be, I don't know, Maggie, is it a 20-month construction? Roughly 20 months.
I think so, that's about right.
Yeah.
Roughly 20 months.
Okay, the next question is, did the team look at providing any 4 or 5 bedroom units for larger families? I know you've got some 4 bedrooms. Did you think about 5 bedrooms?
No, we did not. We did not.
We capped at 4.
Yes.
We do have 4s in the project, but no 5.
Do all the units have air conditioning? And if so, how was that done affordably?
We do not have air conditioning. I don't know if that's a later thought that we have, because we do have, especially after the heat dome that happened over the Seattle area earlier this year. I think I've asked my teams to go back and look at how the communal spaces might, we might have colder air in those places for people to go and stay, which we did in Chinatown during the heat dome, and how important that becomes. I think for us, the air quality is really about cleaner air.
Yeah, we do have the ERVs, which don't actually condition the air, so they're not air conditioners, but they do some passive heat exchange. And so if the air inside is a little cooler already, then as it goes through an ERV, it'll do some level of preconditioning to the air coming in from the outside. So it helps a little bit in that regard. And then the project does have, I don't know exactly what you would call them, but they're panels. They're not what you're thinking when I say this, but they're panels that go into windows to allow for a freestanding air conditioner. So if you had one of those suitcase-like little air conditioners, you can use one of those. And they're not just the ones that come with it. It's not like the thing that has lots of gaps around it, because penetrations in the wall was such an important part of the ERVs and the air treatment system in general. It's something that's actually made by the window manufacturer that like clips in really nice and securely with no gaps, and you can plug in an air conditioner to that in that way.
Thank you. What is your parking ratio to units? And then this person said that she often finds larger families rely on gig work, so they need their cars in parking spaces.
So the
so
site, right? So Maggie, do you want to talk the one about just the direct parking under the building?
Yeah, so we do have parking directly under the building. Building A has about 53 stalls and Building B has 21. And some of those are allocated to the commercial uses. Some of the stalls for Building A are for El Centro or for AI Pace. So there's not a ton of resident parking there. I believe there is 1 stall for every 2, 3, and 4 bedroom unit. We have a ratio that meets that.
There
think that's
is a
correct.
parking lot across that internal drive that Maggie pointed out. I think there's 169 parking stalls in that that sit mostly unused from a certain time of day overnight. That is under, I think, the lease of the Department of Commerce of Washington State. And so we've had some preliminary conversations about what it would look like to share parking so we don't have to develop a bunch of it on site and increase housing dollars for that. And you are right, there are a lot of larger households that do a lot of gig work at this time, whether it's Uber, Lyft, or whether it's Fampa or Uber or those other food delivery things that I can never keep track of.
Thank you. Are you doing right to return or community preference to fill the units?
We are doing community preference on that. All units that are funded by the city of Seattle have to do affirmative marketing. And I know some buildings have met certain criteria, certain desired criteria. They wanted more people of color to apply. I know one building in particular had gotten 86% people of color moving into their units by just doing affirmative marketing. But we will be looking at the city of Seattle's community preference policies and trying to implement those, but still meeting fair housing requirements on site, because there is a need, right? And what's great is that the recent census data came out, going to analyze that, understanding that there are flaws in the probably in the most recent census data, and look at the changes in the trends over time as to who's living there and who's moving out.
Are there any other policies that you use to decide who gets access to the units besides community preference? And is there a wait list for the project already?
There is no wait list for the project already. I think the big one is going to be community preference. And the community preference policy is probably going to look at governmental harm over time to certain people as well as economics. We're doing a community preference policy, and we just worked with the city of Seattle on one for a site that is probably a mile away, just on the edge of Chinatown, Chinatown Central area. So we'll be using that experience both on developing it and the approach and the legal assistance that we're going to seek to make sure that we're within fair housing law on this project, just to kind of figure out what can we legally do to do that. And that is probably the major priority. The other one, I think, is we have designated certain families, large family, and we also have some disabled units on site. And we will also be affirmatively marketing not just to households, but also to seniors, right? Because they've got the PACE program down below, and there could be people that want to access the PACE program that want to live close in to the facility. They don't have to, because transportation is provided by the PACE provider. But for those that may want to live near family on Beacon Hill, but not live with them, there's that option there.
Great. Next question is, how did you take the culture of future residents into consideration when planning and designing these buildings?
We think flexibility and options are really, really important for people, and providing a range of unit types is really important. They are basically pretty open floor plan. And I know in talking with the Seattle Housing Authority, who deals with a very wide range of households and countries of origin, and what a household means and what a family means in their household, they've chosen to have different types of units and where kitchens are situated and all that. We did not go that far. We went with flexibility. We went with making sure things are long lasting. That's really, really important for us. But we can't tell you who's going to live there in the future. We do know that Seattle tends to become a much more expensive city. And so certain people that have the resources are moving in. We also know that people are moving out of the Beacon Hill neighborhood, and trying to make sure that people have an opportunity to stay to those communities that are really important for them is the key. And so for us, that means flexibility on unit size and type.
There's also there's a couple of other nods to culture in terms of the exterior design and design of just the building in general. Maiko mentioned kitchens a little bit, and we don't have a huge variety of kitchen situations, but we do have some units where intentionally the kitchen is not necessarily just that big open situation to the rest of the living room, because there are definitely cultures that prefer having their kitchen kind of tucked away, view it as more of a, you know, a dirty, messy area rather than like the hub of activity in a home. And in terms of the exterior, there are some places where art's been identified. There will be art. There's a mural on kind of this little overlook piece at the far north end, and so there'll be art that's developed with community input and involvement there. And there's some other locations up near the internal drive and the main road for art as well. I will say, in terms of the exterior design, a lot of it was driven by landmarks, which they were great to work with. They were very reasonable, but we are part of a historic campus, and fitting in with that campus was really important to fitting our landmarks or to meeting our landmarks designation. Even though the structures we're building, they themselves are not landmarks, the campus as a whole is. And so a lot of the design cues are pulled from what you see on the rest of the campus.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more. Was there any thought to measuring the health impacts of the building on residents after it's occupied, potentially through a partnership with public health or some other organization?
We think about it. We also think about the fact that we have our, the PACE program is run by International Community Health Services, which is a federally qualified health center, and working with them. Some of the educational attainments is a bit of a challenge for us to measure, which is also really important because you have to have relationships with Seattle Public Schools. We're just not there yet. It's been interesting working with the school district on how they think about the children in the housing that's near to them. And yeah, we haven't quite gotten there yet. We're just trying to figure out how to finance it and build it. You know, I mean, it is important to measure these types of things. We already know how bad the air quality is around there. And I know from the housing that we manage that we are constantly battling people, trying to battle the air quality there, especially when it gets really, really bad. So I think we would continue those same efforts up on the Hill. You're really not that far away.
Okay, let's try to squeeze in one more. I think, Maiko, this one's for you. How did the Public Development Authority analyze the short-term cost versus long-term costs and benefits in deciding to pursue the Exemplary Buildings Program?
Well, as Maggie said, we didn't think, gosh, we really want to do this. It was, wow, how do I feel about housing children who are part of the community, part of my community? And how do we fix the air quality there? So I do kind of take this personally. I really do, because as I said, I live like a mile and a half south of the site. And the photo of the family that you saw, Amy and Daniel and all this, Daniel was in orchestra with my daughter. So, I mean, when you work in a neighborhood for a long time, they're part of your community. And so I feel like you must do the best that you can for that. So yeah, it does cost more to do this. Yeah, how awful am I going to feel as I go from home to work every day past this site, knowing that I haven't done something or tried to do something to know that there's an existing condition there that I can't work around, or have to work around. How can I just couldn't keep doing my work if I didn't do that. And how can anybody do that without, I cannot avoid the site in my day-to-day life. It's just there. I can't avoid the knowledge of the air quality. That's just already there. So you have to kind of try to do whatever you can to do that, to make it better. I think that's why we're not like this developer with this major pipeline, because we wanted family housing. We argued for it for 10 years, right? And yeah, you make those decisions along the way that have to sit for you.
Well, we're out of time. Maggie, you came off mute. Do you have something really quick you'd like to say before we close it out?
Nothing in particular, but thank you, Housing Washington, and thanks to the whole team that worked on this. We had a lot of other consultants and contractor and building partners that helped make this come together. And you know, it's been a real team effort and a real collaborative effort all along the way. So
and a lot of fun arguments. A lot of arguments along the way. Like, we can't afford this. We have to afford this, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the good reasons. For good reasons. Yeah.
Well, thank you to both of you. This is a wonderful project. I know we're a proud funder. Marty Koistra mentioned in the chat that he's honored to have this exciting project be part of the national program. Yeah, he's out there. Thanks everybody for attending the session, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you later in the conference. Thank you.
Call if you have questions. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Maggie. You made life